on?
David Gillick, welcome to What Makes You Tick. Finally, we're here.
We're here. Thanks for having me in.
Thanks for coming in, pal. We've been talking about doing this for a while now, and it's actually start of the year, a kind of fresh beginning, fresh start. It was lovely. I sent you a message before, just after Christmas. It was like, right, we get this happening. Lock it in. Let's do it. Yeah. Great to have you on board. For anybody who doesn't know, David Gillick is now a household name in Ireland. Like Nevin Maguire, right? So David, I have kind of written a few notes here, so just I'm going to refer to them. But I have you Irish track legend. I have you as the European gold medalist. I have you now as a sports pundit. You have your own chef book as well, or cookbook. You have been a big advocate for mental health. And also you're a dad, you're a husband, you're a brother. Like you're packing it all in, man.
Yeah,
you're doing a lot. Fair play to you.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't ask me to describe myself. Yeah, look, even when you just list things like that, you know, it's been a bit of a whirlwind of 10 years, 11 years since I stepped off the track, you know, and dare I say I probably didn't really have a plan back then, you know. So look, it's great that I've got to a point where I'm doing things that I enjoy, you know, and that's first and foremost. And I'm passionate about the things that I do. It's nice to still be involved in sport, my sport, athletics, and just have that sort of buzz around it, you know.
If I was to ask you, considering the title of the pod is What Makes You Tick, like the version of you 10 years ago, if you asked that question, would be very different to the version now.
Yeah.
Could you just kind of like what is it? What makes you tick now today?
Well, I think, you know, it's nice to maybe be able to look back 10 years and kind of go, okay, well, back then, like I wouldn't have been able to answer that question because I wouldn't have really known myself. Because I think when you're involved in sport, you know, for whatever reason, you know, growing up, you realise, okay, you have a talent in a certain sport and then that takes over and consumes your life. And I love that, don't get me wrong. And it's all geared around a championship. So you're just on that sort of roller coaster and on that treadmill to the next thing. So it's almost like, you know, at certain times you're on autopilot and you become very defined around your sport. Mm-hmm. So when that all ended, I wouldn't have been able to answer that question. I wouldn't have known. It would have all been about athletics, you know, competition. I want to run. Whereas now, like, there's an awful lot goes into that, you know, everything from, you know, been passionate about what I do, but also the basics of like, I have to get out and do a run. You know, if I don't do that, like that annoys me, that frustrates me. So there's a balance and probably a multitude of things that I'm a lot more aware of now that has an impact on me than I would have had, say, 10, 11 years ago.
So let's take it back a little bit more, right? Let's go back to when you were a young fella.
Yeah.
10 years old or whatever, right? Like, what was it like? What was childhood like for you? Was sport a big part of it?
Yeah.
And like, what were kind of the key influencers to you when you were starting?
Like, you know, when I look back at my kind of, like even, you know, 10, 11 into my teenage years, like growing up, like sport was always big in our house. I'm the youngest of four, so 2 brothers, a sister and me. My mum would have participated in sport. Like, you know, she was on the first women's Irish basketball team back in the 70s, you know, like she then went on to referee, to officiate, table official, you know, so I kind of grew up around sport. Like, you know, they set up the Dublin ladies basketball board and, you know, their meetings were in the front room of the house, like, you know, and I'd be running out with tea and biscuits and stuff. So I was around sport and it mattered to my mum, it mattered to my dad. He was big into the GA. You know, he would have participated. I would have watched them play sport and watched my brothers and sisters. So it was always there. And there was never any pressure or anything like that. You know, it was just more, it was part of our lifestyle. And, you know, anytime the Olympics were on, I can always remember, like, you'd have it on the TV and then it would be on the radio, it'd be blaring, like, you know. And that was sport. And I suppose being the youngest, I kind of followed suit. And, you know, even in school then as well, you got involved. I was active. I enjoyed sport.
Did you try everything?
I did, yeah.
Did you, yeah?
Yeah. I was competitive. Like, I liked to win.
Okay.
You know, so from whether it was like the 3-legged race to, you know, to a soccer match, to a GA match, to, you know, everything from, like, I remember badminton, you know.
I could see the reaction if you
yeah.
lost.
Oh, I had a ferocious
handle
temper.
it, did
Yeah,
you?
Jesus, I had a temper, yeah. I remember getting sent off in a GA match up in Marley Park, and I literally abused the referee. And I remember he gave me a yellow first, and then I was ranting and raving, and I was convinced he was against us. And I was like, you have a whistle. What more do you want? The foghorn. Use the thing. And he gave me a second yellow. And
How old were you?
I was probably about, I'd say then maybe like, I'd say it was about 12, 13.
Yeah.
And my dad, it's the only time he ever grounded me.
Really?
Back to the house. He said nothing to me and just said, I'm disappointed. Don't come out of that room for the rest of the day. And I remember being in the room, like, you know, and he wasn't, like, my dad wouldn't be a vocal parent on the sideline. He'd be quiet and he'd do the general, come on Ballantyre or come on Broadford Rovers or whatever it was at the time, but he wouldn't have been overly vocal. But I pissed him off that day. And I always remember that as maybe a bit of a turning point in terms of, like, connecting the dots between, if I lose the rag, I don't play well.
Interesting.
You know, and even at that age, but I had a temper. But I was in a school where we had some, like, my mates were big into sport. Like, two of them ended up going over playing football in England. Two of the other lads would have, like, played everything from tennis to table tennis at a high level, you know, in Ireland. And we were always kicking football. Like, we used to hop the fence into Wesley College onto the Astro and play football until the security guard came and kicked us off. Like, that was the way we hung out growing up. We were always quite active and competitive, you know. And I think that just instilled a bit of kind of the sport in me. And, like, look, I never thought I'd have a career in it. It was just something I enjoyed. I did a multitude of different sports. And, you know, as I went on in my teenage years, you know, say the soccer went first, and then it was just GA and athletics, and then the GA went when I was about 19.
But how did you get into the athletics? So, like, what was the starting point there?
Yeah, like, very lucky. Again, like, you know, the backbone of sport in this country is volunteers, and, you know, people setting up clubs in various communities around the country. And, you know, Athletics Dundrum Athletic Club as it was, and then it merged with South Dublin Athletic Club and became Dundrum South Dublin. That was at the end of my road in Ballantyre Community School. The big hall down there, that's where training was every Tuesday and Thursday. And my brothers and my sister all participated in it. And again, a lot of kids in the area would have participated in athletics because it was very central in the community. And I was no different. I went down. I can remember going down when I was about 7 or 8, you know, which was young. And there was one other kid there called Ivan Sheehan, and the two of us used to just stand against the wall for like probably a half an hour, 20 minutes until Liz McDonough came in and said, put the ball away, because the older kids would be kicking football for like half an hour. And then it started. And I was young, but I was fast. And I think, you know, Ivan was quick as well. He was a year older than me in school. And it was probably in school when I realised that, like, I enjoyed this and I was fast, you know, because you had to come in a bun school. We had a teacher, Olive Horgan, who was into running. And every springtime she'd bring us to the field beside the school and run races. And that was literally my earliest memory of running. I'd represent the school down in the Cummin Bun School. You know, I did 3 years of that because that's all there is. I think it's under 9s, under 10s, under 11s or something like that. From there, joined the local athletics club, and that was the start of it, you know. Did
you get the encouragement then as well to kind of, because you were running and you were quick, was there a natural talent that people were able to see as a young...
like, you know, and it's not been arrogant or anything, but I can remember, like, you know, as a kid, like, you know, oh, Gillick's a bomber, like, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, you know, there was that, you're the fastest in your class, you know, and that's the most important thing when you're in primary school.
I was never the fastest in my class.
You just rugby tackled the ball out of the way, did you?
No. They just didn't like running at me.
I can understand that. And that was kind of the start of it. But, like, I think speed is a great asset to have in various sports, you know, and like soccer, I loved playing, like, you know, football and GA and all that. And again, that was pretty central in my community as well, in my area, Ballantyre, St. John's, Broadford Rovers. So and all my friends were doing it. So you kind of got involved in everything.
Yeah, the speed will translate into it. Like I you ever see when kids starting off, if they have pace against, because you're still learning to coordinate yourself. Like, you know,
massively,
but if you've got a bit of speed, you're leaving fellas in their dust, and in your dust, and it's such a huge advantage. Was there Was there a moment, like you talk about volunteers there, right? Was there one key volunteer that kind of helped you believe that you could be brilliant?
I think,
Or was
yeah,
it-
like my earliest memory would have been like the McDonoughs, Liz and Eddie.
Yeah.
You know, they were husband and wife that set up the athletic club. Long before me now, you know, when I came into it. But they were like there every training session. Like, you know, you're talking Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sundays, you know, they were there. And, you know, even on top of that, like, I always remember like going to races. You know, a coach would leave BCS, you know, or Saturday or Sunday, and it'd be full of kids, and we'd go off to God knows where, cross country, up to Gormanstown, Julianstown, down to Neenah, Tullamore, and it was a buzz. And I think like that competitive nature, be it an individual race or be it relays, like you grow in those circumstances as well. And I think as a kid, you begin to learn about like, you know, oh, you're the fastest in your school or your area. Then you go to Dublin and you're getting beaten. You quickly kind of realise, you know, that keeps you in check. You go on to national level, again, you're getting your backside handed to you from lads, you know, down the country or up north. And all of that is a learning process. How do you deal with that? And, you know, it was probably, I probably stood out, you know, when I was like 9, 10, 11, maybe 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1-0.
Really?
Yeah, I went backwards. Like,
Was that because of
I think there's growth and kind
development
of
going
development
through
going
your
through puberty and all that. And,
yeah.
you know, I was probably a little bit, you know, a late developer. So then that has an impact on your self-esteem and your,
Yeah.
you know, your confidence, and, you know, even been around other kids. Where do you fit? You know, how do you fit in? And I can remember going out to like, they used to have it was the BLOE at the time, open sports. And, you know, back in the day, you'd go down to like UCD in Belfield and I'd come back with a rake load of medals. And then as I went a little bit older, I began coming like 4th, 5th. I wasn't winning anything. And even now, I always kind of wonder, like, why did I stick at it? Because I was playing football with Bradford Rovers at the time, and then I was playing GA with Ballantyre St. John's, and like I was doing a lot of stuff. I don't know why I kept at it. The only thing I can think about is that when I went to St. Benilda's in secondary school, they had a good tradition of cross country. And in cross country, as much as you're an individual, you're also part of a team.
Okay.
You know, 6 lads. And we had a really good team. So I went from, say, being a scorer on the team, like top 4, to like 5th man, 6th man. But yet the team was doing well. And we were getting on the podium, and, you know, we won a national medal, team medal. And maybe that kept me involved in it. And just kept the interest and kept the motivation. And it wasn't until like probably maybe like 5th year in secondary school, I noticed a big change in me. Suddenly I had the pace back, and like on the GA pitch, like my speed was really setting me apart, and I was doing well. And then that, I suppose, coincided with, you know, East Leinsters in the schools, Leinsters, and that year I won my first All-Ireland medal in over the 400 metre hurdles in the inter-schools down in Tullamore. And that was that's the first time now I tasted any kind of national success at a young age.
Was that a time when you felt like, right, I'm going to give this a proper shot?
Not really. I was still like, you know, I was still...
Because, you know, you're at that stage, you're trying to
Yeah.
figure out what sport you love. I remember playing loads of
Big
sports,
time.
and at 14, 15, my old man was saying, like pick one.
Yeah,
which
one?
Which one are
Yeah.
you going after?
Yeah.
You know, and you don't know if it's the right one, but you're kind of going...
It's a leap of faith
Yeah.
sometimes. And I would have been, what, like maybe 16, 17. It wasn't until I was 19 did I focus on athletics.
Okay.
And that all came about, you know, I done well that year, and then the following year, so 6th year, I won the 400 metres. I couldn't really hurdle for shit, so I concentrated on the 400 metres with no hurdles. And then the following year was the World Juniors in Jamaica. Okay, so I never made any internationals underage. Like even lads I was training with would have gone schools internationals, you know, Celtic Games, things like that, which are all underage internationals. Never made any of them until 2002. The World Juniors were on in Jamaica, and the qualifying standard over 400 metres was 48 seconds. So the previous year I ran 48.5. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's really doable. You know, roll on 12 months, fitter, faster, stronger, you know, definitely half a second as well within my reach. I ran 48.4. Didn't make it. You know, I can remember the deadline day down in Tullamore, and around 48.4. I wasn't going. But what they did do, they sent a relay team, a 4x400 metre junior relay team, and off we went to Jamaica, and that just changed everything. It was just an unbelievable experience. I can remember getting the kit, You know, going into the front room of the house and putting all the kit down, and then getting my mum and dad to come in and go, look at this, look at this, look at this, because I never had an Irish international vest before.
Wow.
You know, and that was it. You know,
brilliant feeling.
Unbelievable. We flew Jamaica Airways over to Kingston. You know, it's like cool running stuff. You know, you're going to the Caribbean.
Feel the rhythm.
Feel the rhythm. Feel the rhyme. Kissing the eggs and all this.
Yeah, you're dead, man.
Look the egg. And all of that was just like, it was just an amazing experience. You know, getting to Jamaica, you know, staying in the university, going down to like the cricket pitch to warm up, and just brilliant, just absolutely fantastic, with a great bunch of lads as well. And we did okay as part of the relay team. You know, I think semi-final came out 5th or 6th. We didn't qualify for the final, but that wouldn't have been maybe our objective. It was kind of to run fast there and fly the flag, you know. But the biggest thing was that I can remember on a Saturday night. So this is like, you know, I think the second last day of competition, and in the National Stadium, packed in Kingston, Jamaica. And I'm talking about people climbing over the walls and the gates. It was like something, you know, just madness. Yeah. And they were all going crazy because of a local lad who, in the stadium, was running the 200 metre final. And he came out and he absolutely annihilated everybody else. He was 2 years younger than everybody else as well. So he would have been only like, what, maybe 16, 17. Even, you know, I think he was about 16. And he was, of course, Usain Bolt. And the whole stadium just going Bolt, Bolt, Bolt. Like this is a junior athlete, and the whole stadium. It was absolutely fantastic. And I remember just kind of like looking to a few of the lads, and we were all in amazement because we've never witnessed or experienced anything like this. And for me, I was just like, you know what? I want more of this. This is it. And I was still playing GAA at the time with my club, Ballantyre. Came back and I was like, that's it. I'm going to become an athlete. And that was quite late. I would have been like, as I said, like, you know, 18 pushing 19. Like,
the interesting though, isn't it? So to see how popular athletics could be in a different country, right? Because in Ireland, obviously, you're fighting against all the different sports, right? Yeah. But to be in an international venue representing Ireland in a stadium that's packed even more than it should be.
Oh yeah.
And you can hear the atmosphere. Like, you probably don't hear the atmosphere like that at some massive sporting team events, international events. Like,
and this was a junior event, but it was unbelievable. It was also the first time I saw someone run 10 flat. You know, I'd never seen someone run that fast before in my life. Darryl Brown from Trinidad and Tobago. I watched the 100 metre final, and I remember just watching this lad just float along the track, and the clock stops at 10.00. And I remember just going, oh my, that was unbelievable.
Nobody had broken sub 10 at that stage, did they?
Well, as a junior, probably as a junior, no. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. But I had never seen someone run that fast in the flesh. And even like, you know, just like in Jamaica, like athletics is a massive sport in Jamaica because they're very strong at it. And it's also something that, like, their schools are so talented. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and one of the things that a lot of colleges do from America would go down and look at potential talent. And it's a huge opportunity for kids to get third level education on a scholarship to the States. So it's a massive thing over there. Mm-hmm. If you can get yourself to America on a scholarship, you know, you're giving yourself such an opportunity, and then even potentially go on and become a professional athlete. They look at it like we would do here with soccer, with lads going to England. You know, and success breeds success. So if they see one or two people doing it, then all of a sudden, the more and more people get involved, right? And at a young age, then they're basically positioned that if we mold you into a certain way, you could potentially get a scholarship. And that's the way it works. And even like later on, when I was training in America, I was the only European in a group that was predominantly Caribbean athletes. Like, it's a huge opportunity, and that's the way they treat it. Like, you know.
Tell me from there then. So 19 years old, you come back and you go, right, I'm done. I'm going to focus on athletics. What happened next? So, like, what supports did you have in place? Did you have to go find your coaches? Like, did the government help you?
Yeah, no, it's fairly, you're very much your own CEO, even at that young age. I was in the club, Dundrum, and, you know, there was two coaches, Lucy Moore and Jim Kidd. Basically, when you ask the question, like, who kind of gave you that kind of leg up or that confidence or told you, you know, you could be really good, it was those two. Yeah. And Jim kind of took over a lot of the track element for me, and like Lucy would have been kind of more technical, more kind of strength and conditioning. And from that perspective, collectively, that's where a bit of belief started coming in and kind of going, okay, yeah, maybe I can make teams. And, you know, you have that kind of like a junior. I was still, you know, I did my leaving cert. I went to college. I was living at home. Like nothing really changed. More the fact that like, okay, like I could now put all my emphasis and energy into training. So my training would have increased from maybe, you know, 3 to 4 days a week to now like 5, even 6 days a week. At the age of kind of 19, I started looking after myself in terms of getting into the gym and trying to like, you know, I was skinny at the time. I didn't have any kind of muscle. I had no conditioning. So all of that kind of needed a bit of work, particularly as I was trying to run a sprint event and over 400 meters. So Lucy was good at that. And, you know, it took a couple of years to really kind of see the benefits of it all. But like there was an element of belief coming off that junior experience, a bit of confidence. And then you have like what's called the under 23 kind of bracket, which you get 2 years at that. And there's a European Championships. And I qualified, you know, I think I was 19, 20, so on my year down they would call it, and because of that I got a grant, and I got a grant of I think it was about €4,000. At the time it was like 140,000 euro. It was huge. So that enabled me then that I didn't have to work a part-time job.
Okay.
You know, because I used to work in the local garage. I used to work in the local shop. You know, I can remember coming in from a training session like one Sunday morning and literally grabbing something in the kitchen and then running down the road to work in the shop.
Shift.
My shift was from 1 o'clock to 11 o'clock.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I can remember being so tired. I had to sit. The old till used to be beside the window, and I had to sit. My legs were gone. I had to sit down, like, you know, and then like the boss would come in and you jump back up, you know.
I actually I have something similar. When I was in college, I was trying to make it as a pro, right, and was working in lifestyle sports. And on a Sunday, we had a match on a Sunday, and I was supposed to work, and I told my boss, I said I can't work. And she goes, you need to make a decision, Stephen. Do you want your job or do you want to play sport? I was like, oh, I'm playing sport. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
And then a week later, she rang me and she goes, oh, you can come back if you want. But it is interesting, isn't it? Like you're able to juggle those things because you're young, you're trying. You know that you have to do that.
You have to do it, yeah.
One of the areas I wanted to kind of ask you is like a lot of people see the success, but they don't necessarily see the sacrifices that are made, right? Not necessarily saying that was a sacrifice, but what in your career do you think were the biggest trade-offs you had to make on the way to becoming an elite athlete? And would you do anything differently? Yeah,
like I was like, I suppose because I was relatively kind of late at focusing in on the one sport, and I wasn't earmarked or tagged when I was like 14, 15 as oh, here's the next great thing, you know. It wasn't like that at all. So I kind of look at it, and I had a very kind of normal upbringing. You know, me and my mates, we got a few kind of Dutch gold and ran up to the field and all. We did all that. I went to college. I was probably hungover every Friday for like probably 2 or 3 years. I used to do my the driving test on a Friday morning. I'm sure she kind of was like, what, every Friday? I had no lectures on a Friday, like, so Thursday was the night out. You know, I did all of that, and it probably wasn't until like maybe 2003, 2004 that things really kind of, right, there's a bit of a choice here. Like, I can't go out on a Friday because of a training session on
Did someone say that to you, or did you make the decision
I
yourself?
kind of began to realise, you know, and even with Jim, like, you know, Jim would have been very like, I can remember the under 23s, and I was running probably like 47 high. And I remember one day in the gym in UCD, and Lucy was like, the standard was 47.15. Okay, it's all standards in athletics. Like, that's the way it works. They're internationally set. You hit them, you're a good chance of going. And I can remember in the gym, Lucy kind of pulled me to the side, and she was like, you do know, like, you can get this standard. And I remember kind of going, oh, do you think? She's like, yes, I do think. And I always remember that conversation because that probably changed my attitude a little bit, where it was nice to go to the World Juniors and it's great, you know, saw Usain Bolt and all that. But again, the next level, you know, going as an individual, qualifying for championships. So when Lucy kind of said that to me, I was a little bit like, okay, there's belief there. Like, actually someone believes. And I did get the standard around 48.6. 46.8. So I was well inside it. And that changed an awful lot because I got a grant, and again, suddenly you're kind of on another level, so it's increasing, you're getting quicker, You're now kind of on the radar as someone who's got a bit of potential.
So you go from team event, right, where you're cross country, then you go into a team event in at the juniors, right? You haven't essentially qualified as an individual until now, right?
Until now, yeah.
So you're now what, 23?
No, even like that was under 23s, so I would have been first probably pushing 20 by this stage.
Okay, so so you're now qualifying as an individual, right? So your coach says to you, "I believe in you." Was that a moment where you kind of go, "Okay, she's right"? Like, because until you saw what's the difference as you're in that run? What's the difference of a 47 high versus a 46 high? Do you know, like, can you feel it as you're going around?
Yeah. It's all about, look, there's confidence, self-belief. You know, when you're on that start line, you have a clear objective and you know exactly what you're trying to do. You're not thinking about everybody else, you know, the other 7 people around you. And that's the interesting thing with a 400, because you have the stagger. So if you're in like lane 3 or 4, you can see the guys in lanes like, you know, 5, 6, 7 and 8. And that can be very off-putting, because if they go off fast, suddenly you can easily run someone else's race. So I think the difference is that belief, that confidence, even as you set the blocks, knowing that you've left no stone unturned in your preparation. You know exactly what you're trying to do over 4. Like, every race has a strategy. Even 100 meters, even a 60-meter race has a strategy. And what you're trying to do is plan the run and run the plan. And that's what it's all about. So when you have the confidence and you have those people around you that enable you to tick the boxes as you run, the result will look after itself. And it goes back to the old cliche, like, you know, control the controllables, focus on the process. But that's exactly what it is. And I think the simple things, the difference is that you're setting the race up for yourself in the first 150 meters, you know, and then it's a case of controlling it and then working hard up the home straight, you know. And like, that would be the big difference I would have found, is that, yeah, probably had a little bit more consistency in my training over the months. I wasn't distracted with other sports, you know. I was very focused now on athletics. I also began to kind of, my mindset had changed as well. I kind of wanted this, whereas before it was, I happened to be good at it. I didn't know why. It's just
interesting,
the cards that you were dealt. And then suddenly you kind of go, all right, you know, I could actually do something here. Like, and that was probably the start. But I went to those championships in Bydgoszcz in Poland, and I ran like an absolute mule. I was last in the semi-final, like way out the back door. But I was so nervous. And this was, going back to your point, like, it was my first individual, you know, at that level. And straight away, I'm looking at all the different nations, you know, all the different athletes who, yeah, in fairness, like, were older than me. But still, you know, I struggled. I was out in lane, I think I was out in lane 7 or 8. So I had all the athletes in the lanes inside me. And I found that very off-putting at that level. But again, this is a process. And I can remember, like, you know, it was a relatively decent championship for Ireland. Derval O'Rourke ran really well in the 100-meter hurdles and qualified. This is under 23. She qualified for the Athens Olympics. My kind of competitor over 400 meters, my age as well, Dave McCarthy, made the final of that championship over 400 meters. And you kind of feel like a bit of an also-ran, you know, because suddenly you're just in the stands. You're just, you know,
spectator.
A bit of a spectator, you know. And again, I can remember how I felt. I felt embarrassed. I felt like, you know, my parents were there. I felt like I let people down. You've come all the way over here and I haven't even performed. I've ran really bad. And that fuels the fire. Like, and those are the things where resilience and all this is built. You have to be exposed to that in order to develop. Like, that's how you learn. That's how you take ownership. And that's how you kind of go, do you know what? Right, I'm going to get the finger out my hole here and I'm going to work harder. And that's essentially kind of what happened into 2004. And, you know, again, I wasn't looking at the Athens Olympics. I kind of felt like I wasn't hitting those numbers. That really kind of wasn't on my radar, so to speak. But I went to the World Championships in 2003 as part of the relay team, and that was a fantastic experience. But it's all that process. And I was, look, you know, when you talk about sacrifices, like, it's more the choices, I think. You know, it's kind of like I wanted to run. Like, you know, I had those teenage years where I didn't feel I missed out on anything. You know, I did everything I wanted to do, nightclubs and out with the lads and all that crack. I wanted to now give this a go, you know, and that's kind of really what happened into 2005, which turned out to be a fantastic year for me. But like, that was when, okay, you know, that element of belief, you know, you'd gone to championships where you hadn't performed, you know, you'd experienced all that, and, you know, it was time now to kind of grow a little bit and put things in order and things in place.
Let's talk about 2005 though. Let's talk about the moments, like the highs.
Yeah.
Like as so European gold.
European gold indoors,
right.
Yeah.
Like first Irish man in what, 70 years?
Yeah, a long time.
70 odd years to do it.
Yeah.
Again,
but I didn't know any of that.
Okay, so this is all the here. Okay, so this is the looking back after you've made the achievement, but you're just so focused on what you need to do.
I didn't have a clue.
You're blanking out everything.
People kept talking about Bob Tisdale. I was like, who's Bob Tisdale?
Who's Bob?
You know, I didn't know who he was. And then, you know, I can remember I hadn't even qualified.
But can you talk to me about the race? Can you just explain what was going on in your head about the race? Because I think
pure panic.
Yeah, probably. Oh shit!
Just run, just like it.
Because what I find is really interesting is that when you hear people talking about different things and stuff, they talk kind of like a overlooking the whole event, right?
Yeah,
but if we could just take one moment and just talk through that race, like. How could you explain what was going on, like the experience from walking out onto the track, through to the crossing the line?
Well, like if we focus on, I suppose, the final, you know, like just to go back one step, like because I hadn't, it was my first time qualifying for a major championship as an individual.
Yeah.
But again, that whole season, I was just racing. I wasn't even focused on times, and I'd actually won all my races, so I was on a bit of a win streak. Even though, like, again, in my own mind, I wasn't really focused on that. It was just, I was racing to win every race and just running. And then when Madrid came around, and that final in particular, like, it was a whole new experience because the final was late in the day. I wasn't really used to that. So you wake up and you're kind of just waiting around, you know, trying to kill time, learning to do nothing, you know, and I was really nervous. And I can remember the only time I felt kind of calm was when I started warming up. And I can remember going to a warm-up area, going back to the same place in the warm-up area as I had before the semi-final. And just kind of, I remember lying down, and, you know, almost kind of like not sleeping, but you know what I mean? You're kind of napping, so to speak. And I had music in my ears, and then my warm-up would start. And that's when I began to feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more in control, because it was familiar. It's the same warm-up I've done before, training sessions, previous races. This is now kind of game faces coming on. I can remember in the call room, like the tension. So the call room is a place where they, you know, you get together with the people. You're called into a room essentially with the people that you're competing against. They go through your spikes, check your numbers. There's no music, no mobile phones. You know, it's just literally you guys. And that can be very intense. And people do different things. They grunt, they slap themselves, you know, all that sort of crack, you know, and it's just different. It's just weird. So again, you're trying to remain calm. You're focusing on your breathing. Just, you have your race plan and you're just repeating that. As we walked out to the state or onto the field of play, onto the track, like probably the favourite for the race was David Canal, who was Spanish, and this was in Madrid. So like, they were all here for him, and it was a fantastic stadium. It was like vertical walls of people, you know. It was just, and I'd never experienced anything like this, you know. So all of that is a bit mad, you know. Then you're called onto the track, you set your blocks, and that's when shit gets real, like, you know. That's where, like, you know, it's going over in your head, you know. You're setting your blocks, you're now kind of like ready to roll. I felt, you know, you can hear all the noise, and you can hear like the odd kind of even an Irish accent, or you can spot someone or spot a flag. But again, you're trying to just have the blinkers on and remain focused on yourself. And then you're called to your blocks, you know, and that's when the fire is lit. As I always kind of, you know, have the little mantra in your head, say a little prayer, step on the blocks, make sure they're stuck into the ground. And then it's go time, Rick, you know. And again, this is all kind of instinctive. It's almost, you're very much in that kind of flow state. And that's when you know, okay, that's where you want to be. You know, if you're overly too aware of what's going on around you, then it can all fall apart. You know, but I can just remember being clear about what I wanted to do. Just get it hard, hit the bell. Make sure you're like top two at the bell. And I remember just tearing off, and you had the Spanish guy and you had a Russian fella, and the two of them went off like lunatics. And you indoors is different than outdoors. You break at 170 meters, so you're in lanes to 170 meters, then you break, and then it's just like everyone descends in on kind of the inside of the track, lanes 1 and 2, and then away you go for the second lap. It's 2 laps, and it's banked. So the danger with indoors is that you don't want to be too far behind at the bell, because it's very hard to overtake an indoor track, because you only have like short straights, and then it's banked on the bends, and it's really hard to get around. So these two lads, I remember the break, just watching them come in front of me, and the arms were going, they were bumping each other, and I just kind of hung in behind. And then as we went down the back straight on the second lap, in my head I'm thinking, just get as close as I can to kind of mount an attack. But then what happened was the Russian fella was tying up, like lactic hit him hard, and he was coming back to me, and he left a gap on the inside. I went for it. He threw his arm out to kind of block me, went through that, and then it was chasing the Spaniard. And probably, you know, as I came into the home straight, I kind of like, I knew I had him. And I can remember just like the crowd roaring, because he was tying up and I was coming, and obviously they're willing him on. And then, like, it's funny, it's like the track just opens up. It's like the parting of the seas. Suddenly there's nobody in front of you. You're leading. And then I couldn't believe it when I crossed the line. Couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, I've won. Oh my God. And I can just remember then, like, where all the Irish were. I knew where, like, say, the Irish team were sitting, where the athlete seats were, and just looking up, and they're all just going mad, you know. And I didn't know what to do. Like, what do you do? I remember turning around, and then a German guy came third, and he came over, gave me a big hug, and then, like, there's a guy, kind of an official, kind of telling me to do a lap of honour, you know. And, you know, this is stuff you dream of as a little kid. And then some random Irish person came running down, you know, close to the track from the stands, and threw me a flag. And then I remember going down the back straight and looking up, and there's a few of my mates who, and I was wondering, one lad, Mick, I was like, why isn't Mick sitting with all the others? And unknown to me, like, as I said, the race was late in the day. They had enjoyed a few local brews over the course, and poor old Mick fell asleep and didn't even see me race, you know.
Good man, Mick.
And they're all dressed as leprechauns and all. And then down the far end, my mum and dad were there and stuff like that. And it was, yeah, like, it was very much surreal, and pinch yourself. Like, it's hard to take it in when it's happening, because you've dreamt of this as a little kid. Like I grew up in an era where Sonia Sullivan was dominant, you know, and you'd watch the races, you'd hear it on the radio, it was loud in the house, and you'd see her doing a lap of honour. And as a little kid, you'd kind of go, I wonder what that's like. Yeah. Like, never mind the race or the podium, like a lap of honour, like, you know. And then lo and behold, you're doing it, like. And yeah, it was a magic moment. And, you know, I wasn't even 21 at the time, you know. So, like, it was fun. Look, it was brilliant. And I meeting the people afterwards and going back to the hotel, and then, you know.
Just a reinforcement though, right? I'm in the right place now. Let's kick on. Like, place. Yeah. You know, because I've no doubt then that just drove more competitiveness in you.
It did. But I got to be honest, like, I probably struggled with success.
Okay.
You know, the aftermath was that, like, suddenly like people were interested in what I was doing. Like, even locally, people were like, I remember my neighbour coming in and kind of going like, you know, David, we knew you're good, we didn't think you're that good. But I struggled with, what do you do next? Now there's pressure, and that's the way I felt about it. Now there was, I should be making money off this, I should be getting sponsorship, I should be, you know, all of these things are kind of coming into my own head. And then it was like, you know, people would say, when's your next race? And, you know, are you going to win the Olympic Games? All of this stuff. And I was young, and I just felt a bit overwhelmed with it all. But again, like, I was a young lad, I wasn't going to talk about it, you know what I mean? Because, you know, people thought I had made it because I was on, like, the Late Late Show. Like, that's how aesthetically it looked, you know, whereas internally I was struggling with, like, grasping success, and then, okay, what do you do to now? What's next? And it wasn't a happy time after it, if I'm honest. You know, I was really nervous then towards the summer season in 2005. I was anxious. I felt tired. I felt emotionally kind of drained a little bit. And just everything, like, you know, because I just went back to mum and dad's house in the box room I grew up in. And then, you know, you're getting pulled and dragged and all this sort of stuff. And will you come to these awards? Will you show up here? And, you know, very hard to say no to people either. Like, you know, so before I knew it, like, you're run ragged. You're a bit of a busy fool. And maybe not focusing on what you should be doing in terms of your training. And I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the rest of 2005, to be brutally honest.
So what happened next? How did you stay in that rut and that mindset, or did you find a way to cope with it? Or
No, I didn't cope with it. I went on a holiday at the end of kind of the summer. I struggled through 2005 season. I didn't go to the World Championships. I didn't really kick on, like, you know, and I kind of wanted the season to end. I just wanted to get away. So I went to Thailand for like a month, a few mates and all that. And I can remember when the full moon party and wherever it is, Koh Phangan or something like that. And there was this Irish fella. He was a pest. He kept coming over to me, "Oh, Gillick, I'll race you. You know, and this is, people go to Thailand and go to full moon parties, buckets and all this stuff of, you know, whatever, alcohol. And after eventually, I was like, all right then, come on, I'll race you. So we went down to the hard sand on the beach, and the fucker bet me, like, you know. I always remember it. And then I was like, oh my God. And he just wouldn't let it go. And it was probably like a Wolf of Wall Street thing. Like, I thought I was running a straight line. I don't think I was running a straight line, you know.
Yeah. Driving the Lambo home.
Yeah. But I needed to just get away from it all and then kind of start afresh. And like the athletic year, like, people will go January for New Year's resolutions and all that. In terms of athletics, it's always like September.
Okay.
Because that's the way your year would start again, with the major championship in the following summer. And, you know, I was eager to kind of rectify things a little bit. I was looking forward to kind of a refresh and get going again. And 2006 wasn't a bad year. I improved. As an athlete, I was now running like 45.6, which was getting close to kind of like Olympic standards of 45.5 at the time. The European Outdoor Championships were coming. Again, I was relatively highly ranked. I thought, okay, you know what, David, if I made a final, that would be progression. You'll be doing well. But then the nerves hit again and I didn't perform. I completely and utterly bombed in the semi-final in Gothenburg. And like, in hindsight, that was probably the biggest school day that I had, because I changed everything after that. Like, I was so embarrassed. And I think with Gothenburg, again, people were looking back to 2005 and thinking, you know, well, he ran 46-1 indoor. And it's all times. This is like, you know, even in the world of athletics, like, people would ask you your PB before they'd ask you your name, you know, your personal best. And it just got to the point, like, I was just struggling with kind of taking all that on and that expectation going into Gothenburg. You know, who can do well? Well, Gillick ran well last year. Hopefully he can get into a final. I didn't make a final. And off the back of that, I was like, I'd finished college and I was like, basically, I was like, David, you know what? Like, you got to give this a go here. Like, you know, you really need to go to a next level if you want to perform. And that's when I relocated over to England, you know, so huge change. But it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, like, because I was around like-minded people. I was in an environment, an ecosystem, and I just felt like, for once, I kind of felt comfortable again. I felt, this is where I need to be. This is good. I had that enthusiasm about what I was doing. I was motivated. Like, my grant had gone from, say, 4,000 to 20,000, which is a good chunk of money. So that enabled me. I didn't have big sponsors at the time, because I hadn't really performed at a high level. Like, winning a European Indoors is great, but, like, be brutally honest, the big boys play outdoors. That's where it's at. Olympics, Worlds, that's where, you know, if you really want to excel, that's where you need to go. And I knew that. And I think now I was a little bit more experienced, where when I moved to Loughborough in 2006, it was all about the outdoor season. You know, I was willing to forego indoors, because taking a big chunk out of your year to focus on indoors, I felt impacted my outdoor season. So again, it was a learning curve. You know? Talk
to me about that, though, the next step. So, like, the next stage of your career now, you've nearly kind of parked your first element of your career now.
Pretty much,
right?
Yeah.
And now you've gone into the business.
Yeah.
The business end.
Definitely the business. And I can remember meeting Jim and telling him that I was leaving him. Like, you know, it was a breakup. Like, you know, and I was dreading that, and I was in tears driving home thinking, oh, my God, like, what happens if it doesn't work and stuff. And Jim was great. He said, look, if I was you, I'd be doing the same thing. You know, I'd love to work with you up to Beijing Olympics and give it a go, but if I was you, I'd be doing the same thing. And like, that filled me with a bit of confidence, but it's like character building. When you have a really difficult conversation, when you make that decision, well, then suddenly it's got to work. Now you're invested.
A decision settles you.
Now you're all in. Mm-hmm. And that was probably the thing that I needed to do. I needed to take ownership of my career, my talent. You know, now it's up to you. You can't wait around for other people. And I can remember getting the ferry over to Loughborough and stuff, over to England, and then driving to Loughborough, and, you know, straight away, just that sense of like calm, just a sense of confidence, a sense of like, I'm in the right place now to push on. And that was the next level. Now it got serious. Now this was like something that I wanted to have as a career. And I made a promise with myself that I didn't want to get to the age of 30 and look back and go, what if? So that was a massive game changer. I got very much into like, okay, like let's look at my whole kind of lifestyle. If I want to perform well, what do I need to eat? How do I rest better? What do I need to do in the gym? You know, all of these things. And again, that enabled me to grow a little bit and, you know, just kind of get a bit more confidence in terms of I'm doing the right thing. And like that year turned out to be a fantastic year for me. Like I retained my European title in Birmingham 2007. You know, I hadn't really focused on an indoor season. I was in Lanzarote in like January of 2007 and we did a time trial and it went really well. And then Nick was like, tell you what we'll do. We'll do one race indoors and see what happens. So I was like, okay, but like we're focused on the outdoor season. He goes, yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm not going to taper things. I'm not going to change things. The focus is the summer, but let's just have a race and see what happens. So I went to Dusseldorf in probably February 2007 and Ken ran the race, got back to that instinct of just winning. I didn't care. I just wanted to run. And just like the shackles were off and just leg it like and see what happens. And I remember crossing the line, wrecked. And there was a guy in the corner of my eye just off the track jumping up and down. He was shouting at me going, look at the clock, look at the clock. And I looked over and it was 45.91. I'd just broken the Irish indoor record, which was 45.99. And I remember like, oh my God. And my new training partner, the last thing he said to me, I was living with him at the time, the last thing he said to me as I left the apartment, and he gave me the handshake and the hug, and he said, "You're going to surprise yourself." And this was the fella who, you know, world junior finalist. He broke Roger Black's junior record. Like he was really good, and he just said, like, you know what, you're going to surprise yourself. And when I looked at that clock, I did surprise myself.
He could see the effort and the work that you put in.
Work,
yeah, and it was paying off.
I came back to Loughborough the following day, straight back into work.
Yeah.
Didn't take it for granted. It was like straight back into work. In with Martin Rooney was the lad's name. Straight into sessions with Rooney, and even being a little bit tired, you know, off a race, but getting through the session was like it's all about the summer. And then Birmingham came around and changed everything completely. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna go down the day before. Like Loughborough's 40-45 minutes from Birmingham. I got a taxi. I was like, I'm gonna go down late. I don't need to be there anywhere. I'm gonna control everything. I'm gonna stay in my own bed for as long as I can. Went down, and yeah, it was that again. Going back to like what you were saying, like that race, the final. I was pumped. Yeah, like you know, I probably
see it. You could see it in you though.
I was struggling with nerves and stuff like that before the races, and you know that was a real kind of thing that held me back. Like even in Madrid, like I didn't enjoy Madrid because I was so nervous, couldn't eat. You know, I didn't want to leave the hotel room. Whereas Birmingham was different. I had more. Like swagger's the wrong word, but like just confident. You know, I knew that the work was done. I could stand on the track and I knew that like I was ready. And that's exactly the way it unfolded in the final. I can remember my big rival, I suppose, was Bastian Swillems, a German lad who had ran well and ran really well in the semi-final the night before. And I remember I was in semi-final number 2, he was in number 1. And I was like, I watched his race trackside. And I remember thinking, oh God, like I'm going to have to find something now to beat this lad. He's good. And then he was in lane 6. I was in lane 5. So the two best lanes indoors are 5 and 6. So the two winners of the semi-final go into an open draw for lane 5 and 6. And I had lane 5 and I was like exactly where I wanted to be. And I knew I could track him, I could see him. And I'll just try. I remember like Nick in the hotel before he went over was like top 2 at the bell. Be top 2 at the bell and then go. And that's exactly what happened. I was top 2. He went through in a lightning fast pace. And I can remember just thinking, try and get as close to him. And I did that down the back straight, top end. There was just a split second I gained, or it felt I gained on him. And then I knew it. And I kicked off the last bend. And again, similar to Madrid, you know, parting of the seas, it just opened up. And I could sense he was tense. You know, as I was coming up on him, I could feel his tension, which means like he's slowing down. And then just got past him. And I beat him by a 10.1. And I remember dipping for the line and just looking at my foot. And, you know, just the awareness that there was no other foot in the line. I had it, like, you know, and that was it's probably my greatest race, really, because I think the emotion, I remember celebrating afterwards and like kicking the hoardings and banging the hoardings and, you know, I think it was just like there was so like emotionally like even though Madrid was 05, you know, 2006 in Gothenburg was crap. I missed the Worlds in 05, and, you know, those decisions, like, you know, leaving home and doing all those things and breaking up with a coach who'd given me all his time, like volunteered all his time to help me, you know, all of that stuff went into that medal. And yeah, I was delighted. And in the one race, like, you know, broke the national record again, personal best, and qualified for the Beijing Olympics, you know.
What a story, though. What a, like, it's nearly a redemption. You know?
100%. I think that was actually one of the headlines in the papers, actually. Yeah, redemption, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was. Like, I think the frustrating thing is sometimes, like, you know, you have something. It's not in an arrogant way. You know you have it. It's in there. You know that. You know it's there. But like, sport can be so frustrating because the stars have to align. You know, you have to join the dots, and you could do absolutely everything you possibly could, but then someone could get in the way or whatever. And it was just one of these races where it went exactly the way I had planned. And it was the first time, to be brutally honest, that I started visualizing as well. So the weeks and like even the days up to the Wednesday, I'd lie on my bed and I'd visualize the race. Like, I know Birmingham, I've ran there before. I know the smell of the track. I know the sounds, you know. And I was visualizing everything that could happen. I used to write out the race. Like when I think back, like mad, like I'd write out the race. I knew who was going to be there. You know, I knew what was going to happen or how it might happen, and going through these various scenarios. And the mad thing is, I remember crossing the line and I felt like I was here before. Like everything. It was like an outer body experience. I knew. I kind of just knew it, like, you know. It was, I don't know, it probably doesn't make sense, but hey.
No, it does. But like there's always talk with sport, between sports psychologists and visualizations and the likes, how important that can happen, that can have, especially in seeing yourself, if you're playing rugby, for example, what I'm used to, seeing yourself getting in front of the guy in the line out every single time, you know, taking on a ball and making sure you're getting the gain line, all that stuff. And when it happens, it feels normal. Yeah. But I think there's probably a lot more importance to visualization than people realize in sport.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I'm kind of conscious that we've like you've had such an illustrious career, right? And it's been full of challenges and turmoil. Obviously, getting to Beijing and the Olympics, like there's so much to unpack and all that, right? But one of the biggest areas that you're renowned for since you've retired, right, is the work you do with people in terms of sharing your story about mental health and the challenges that you've had in that world post athletics, right? And to see you, what is it, 10 years now since you last ran?
Yeah, 10, 11 years. Yeah.
So like to see you now in a world where you're mentoring, you're advising, you're like the work you did in Paris as a pundit, interviewing the superstars coming off the track. You did it with empathy, you did it with grace, because it was clear that you had been there before. You'd know what was going through their head. Can you just kind of explain the challenges you faced from retiring? And then we might talk about just the world that you're in now and the kind of, and like the trajectory you're in.
I think, like, to be frank and honest about it, like my career as an athlete ended through injury. I was 29 going on 30, and the body just kept breaking down. And, you know, it's cutthroat at that level. Like, you know, I'd lost my funding, I'd lost sponsors, I hadn't competed, and your mind kind of switches to like, well, what are you going to do with yourself? Like, you know, how are you going to make money? I was in Australia at the time training, and, you know, it was costing me, it was bloody expensive to live there. So all of these kind of thoughts kind of come flooding in, and then you're like, yeah, do you know, okay, yeah, I'm done with this, I'm done. So I retired. That was it, plain and simple, I'm done. And like, I didn't know what was going to happen. But I kind of thought, sure, look, people kept saying to me, oh, you got the world at your feet, you could do this, you can do that. And like, some people were right, maybe I could, but like, it all comes back to you and what you want to do. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. My life and my identity was so caught up with athletics. Everything revolved around my athletics. Lifestyle, friends, you know, career, it was all about athletics. And then suddenly it was gone. And the reality was, you wake up, you know, in the box room that you grew up in back in Ballantyre, my mum and dad's house, and it's a Monday, and all your mates are in work, and you know you're kind of at home thinking, what do I do now? I don't need to be anywhere. There's no focus, there's no goal, and that's where things just completely and utterly crashed. I had no clue, and I was always someone who was very regimented, very goal-driven, motivated, you know, routine-based, all of those things. And then suddenly, I'm wandering around the house to the point then where like I didn't want to leave the house because I didn't want to bump into anyone. And then the question, what are you up to now? And you're like, I don't have an answer. So I just, like, if it happened, I'd give some bullshit answer, you know, because I felt that there was pressure to be successful. That was the biggest thing. I kept saying to myself, well, whatever you do, it's got to work. It's got to be successful. You know, and maybe it was a bit ego driven as well, but it was very much like in the world of sport, I was maybe recognised to a certain degree. I'd won a couple of things, I'd ran fast. So the next phase in my life had to be at that level. And if it wasn't, I was a failure. So that drove me into like knee-jerk reactions, quick decisions. You know, first job came my way, jumped at that because I needed money. And then went with, like, without actually going, is this what I want to do? You know, I was craving routine. I was craving a title. So when someone said, what are you up to now? I had something to say. I worked full time for a year, packed in that job, worked in another job, same scenario, hated sport, stopped exercising, comfort eating, like just angry. Always like just, I was bitter now over my sport. I hated athletics because athletics put me in the situation I was in. And that's just how I viewed it. And I didn't want to run. I can remember leaving the house and trying to go for a run one day and getting like a kilometre down the road and just going, F this, and started walking. Just walk back to the house, you know. Went back playing a bit of GAA, which kind of filled the void for a little bit, but it didn't, I wasn't getting anything out of it. It wasn't, you know, and then I'd search for something else. Horrible time. Didn't talk about it because, to be honest with you, I didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't know. And then I thought, like, you know, how can I be moaning about my career? Like, you know, so people would just be like, what are you moaning at? You know, that's the way I viewed it. So I said nothing. And that went on for like probably the guts of 3 years. We got married, myself and Charlotte, in 2014. Easiest thing to hide. You know, you get up in the morning after a night of no sleep and you'd like be that, you'd put the mask on, leave the house and be that person that you thought you should be. And then, you know, you go home, take the mask off, and like it's the person close to you that sees who, like, what was really going on. It's very hard for her, like, and that was just what I was doing. That was the way it was, and I just cracked on. And then eventually it just got worse and worse. Panic attacks, like Sundays, dreaded them because I dreaded a Monday. So like it was firefight till a Friday. Saturday I was actually all right, and then Sunday doom and gloom, and it would just start, the whole cycle would start again. Didn't want to do anything, didn't want to go out, didn't want to be around friends. Yeah, and it would have been a nightmare for Charlotte, like, to be honest, like, because, you know, she knew when we were together throughout my kind of athletic career that my athletics was priority number one. She had a running background, so she got it, she understood it. But I'm sure she kind of thought, like, you know what, David will retire, and then, you know, we can do things. We can go on holidays. We can go out and go to a restaurant. You know, simple things. That wasn't the case. And like she's English. She's now living in Ireland, which is different for her. You know, social network and all that. And that was it. Yeah, like it was a horrible time. I look back at pictures from that kind of like those years, those months, and I look at myself and I look tired. I look bloated. You know, I don't look right. And I wasn't right. But like, to me, I knew that. But everyone else probably thought, oh yeah, he's grand. You know, because I wasn't talking about it. And that went on, like I said, and then got worse. And then Charlotte was pregnant, heavily pregnant on Oscar, who is crazy to believe, but he's nearly 9. And I just had a massive panic attack. And the thing I was so volatile. It could have been over something. Like, I remember one day I couldn't find a pair of sunglasses. I wanted to go for a cycle, couldn't find a pair of sunglasses, and I just had an absolute tantrum of the highest degree, you know, and that's how volatile it was. Like, Charlotte would have been on eggshells the whole time. And on this particular day, something similar. And I can remember, like, I remember her just in tears at the kitchen table, and then suddenly, like, she's heavily pregnant and she's in floods of tears. She's trying to help me and I'm just telling her to go away from me, leave me alone. And then I remember it's in the kitchen and just seeing her in tears and thinking, how am I going to be a good dad? How am I going to be a good husband? And that was probably that split moment where I was like, I need help, like, you know. And thankfully I got it. Like, it took a while to reach out, you know. It was a long process, but I began talking about it. I went through various counsellors and people like that until I actually connected with someone. And that was back in 2016. And I went every week in 2016. So like, I retired in like 2013, and it wasn't until 3 years later that I actually start talking about it. And you know, I still go to a counsellor now. You know, I go every second week now. It's one of the best things I've ever done. You know, massive value. Things didn't change overnight. It was a process. I began learning about me and my journey. And you know, what makes you tick? Like, through talking, I began to understand what makes me tick. I began understanding, you know, as to why I was feeling a certain way, and maybe what caused that, and what could I do then to rectify that and manage that. And all this kind of process in terms of dealing with my own demons, my own mental health, and the loss of my identity. I was grieving over the loss of my career, and I really struggled with that. And yeah, it long process, and that kind of led me then to, like, I can remember, you know, I now talk a lot about that now, openly and honestly, and you know, it's nice to know that maybe it resonates with people and it helps people. But I always remember the first time I opened up about it was actually in an article in the paper, and I was absolutely blown away by the feedback I got, all from men. I never ever did I think, and I never did it for that either. It was just like, you know what, I'm gonna be honest. And I never once thought that I'd get any sort of feedback. I couldn't believe the amount of men that messaged me and just said, like, oh, that resonated. One guy always sticks out because he was of similar age and he had played GAA, and basically he said, I never made it to like a level like equivalent to you in the world of GAA, but he said, I've played GAA my whole life and I'm 35 and I've now retired. And he said, I'm really struggling. I didn't know the impact that GAA had in my life, my identity, my friends, you know, who I hung out with, where I went, everything was geared around my GAA, and now I'm not involved. And he was like, I'm actually really struggling. And I still get that today. I get like, you know, I get like husbands and wives coming up telling me about their other halves struggling and anything they can do. Like, it's amazing how rampant mental health is out there, and the negative impact it's having on people. And you know, if I can just stand up and be open and honest, and it might help one person to make a phone call, or one person to talk honestly to somebody else, well, that's a win. And that's led me down that path. And I find it almost like rehabilitation for me to just get up and be open and honest, because I think, you know, I can talk about athletics and I talk about the big races and the setbacks. You know, my biggest strength is actually showing an element of vulnerability, because through that I've learned an awful lot about myself. It's made me a better person, a better dad, a better husband. It's made me understand what's the true value of life. You know, I went through a phase where I thought it was all money, and I thought, I need more money. If I have more money, I'll be happy and content. What a load of BS, like, you know. And I'm more in a place now where I want to spend more time with my kids. They're growing up, you know. There'll be a time where they won't want to hang out with dad. You know, I don't want those years to pass me by. You know, I want to be able to go, you know, for a walk with Charlotte and grab a coffee and not feel pressure or guilt for not doing something else. And, you know, with the people that matter most. And again, through counselling, like I've put a value on being mentally and physically present with the people that matter to you. And that's kind of the way I try and lead my life now. And that's brought me down the path of, you know, being a speaker, talking openly and honestly, and trying to kind of just try and remove that stigma around mental health and what it is. And yeah, try and get people maybe to open up a little bit more.
I think the stigma is always probably going to be there for certain groups of people, right? And they mightn't buy into it because the term gets bandied around quite often. But just because it gets said doesn't mean it's any relevant or irrelevant. I think it's about being open and about support and being an ear. Because what I've noticed, and I've had challenges, but never to the same extent as yourself. But there's been moments really, really dark and really.
But like, you know, even what you're saying there, to like relevant to me, like it's how you it's how you view it in your own head.
True.
You know, and I think like it's unfair to compare. Oh well, like, you know, I struggled here and you struggled there.
I think that's that's a default for
it is
Ireland,
a default.
It
is.
I think
yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
Like,
so we're almost embarrassed to go. Well,
nobody wants to listen to my thing because they're dealing with their own.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we kind of we kind of put ours as a lesser value, and in actual fact, it's relevant.
It's relevant to you. It doesn't matter
if it's having an effect. Then it's just as relevant as anybody. Like
it's like the world of sport. People say to me, like, you know, oh, you went to the Olympics. I go, yeah, but sure, like, you could have done a park run, the Dublin Marathon, whatever it is. That's your Olympics.
Yeah.
It's all relevant, and it's how you communicate that in your own head. And like I found even my own self-talk and stuff like that was extremely negative, you know, and I bigged it up. What was going on in my world, I bigged it up massively in my head, and it's all relevant. But that's the way, you know, we internalize things ourselves, you know. But I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, you know, this kind of Irish mentality, oh, I don't want to burden you with my problems, like, you know. And I think even in my learnings, like, I went away from talking. There might have been once or twice I tried to talk about it, and you know, people meant well, and like the people that mattered most to me would try and help me. But the minute they'd go, oh, you should do this, it's like wall goes.
There's a great story from Simon Sinek who talks about that. I don't know if you saw it, but he basically says that his one of his best mates is a friend of his who's a general in the army, and he's seen him cry more times than anybody. And he said when he needs help, he doesn't need him to fix it because there are fixers out there, right? And a lot of people steer clear of fixers because they don't want you to fix them. They just want you to listen to them. And his thing is, come and sit in the mud with me and let me tell you what's going on. Yeah. And then all you have to do is just sit there.
100%.
Just be in the mud and just be there.
And I think, like, you know, you mentioned Paris, and, you know, like, we had a great European Championships this last year, should I say, in Rome, and it was great. And athletes come up and they're happy, they perform well, and they're jovial, easy to talk to. Going into Paris, I was like, this is a different level, you know. And even with myself, I was like, how am I going to deal? You know, because I kind of expected a few athletes to come up a little bit disappointed. It's a tougher standard. You know, it may not go the way they want. So what do I do in that? And, you know, I always went back to that. Just listen to them. You know, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You know,
I think what you showed though is that when they were stuck for words, when they couldn't so they're literally just seconds after finishing the most important run of their career, right, to date. But what's so encouraging is that they're so young, and there's so many amazing young talented people coming through. How you managed Rashida after she
that was a tough one,
fell
like,
up short, and like that must have pulled on your experience there massively.
Yeah, and I think throughout the Olympics, like, I got to be honest, like, I felt in the flow. I felt in control. You know, and in fairness to RT, a lot of work goes on behind the scenes in terms of like your crew and producers and even the access to that position. For the first time, we had that position for the whole duration of the athletics, in particular, of the Olympic Games in that mix zone. So that gives me a sense of calm. You know, it's not chopping and changing. I know how things are going to roll. I know roughly how long they're going to be up to me. And all of that helps. And I think, you know, when you've gone through it as well, it gives you a completely different perspective. And I would empathise with the athletes. And I'd also, one of the things I really wanted to do was I wanted to, you know, put context around a performance. I think we live in a world now where it's if you don't win, it's a failure. And I think that's unfair, you know, because each athlete went out there with a personal best and they tried to better that. And that could have been getting a medal, it could have been making a final or even qualification. And that's the story. You know, and also I know what work goes in, and I know, like, I think now being on that side of the track, what I never realised was the impact that performance has on people in the stadium, friends, family. And when you stand and you watch it, it changes your mindset. And that's the thing for me, was like, I know someone may have not performed to the best of their ability or potential, but they've made so many people proud. And there's no harm to kind of lean in on that. And Rashida in particular, like, you know, we moved location in the mix zone because we wanted to get closer, because we wanted to make sure that we would get an interview before, say, BBC, you know. So we changed location. So she came up quicker, and she was shell-shocked. And to be really honest, I thought she was going to walk. I didn't think she was going to give us an interview. Like, she was absolutely crushed, you know, because she's a winner. And she will go on and she will win medals. But in that moment, I don't know, to be brutally honest. I just started talking. Like, you know, the
well,
silence and
It was incredible to watch, because I think as a viewer and a spectator who doesn't know much about athletics, we could hear your care. You were looking after her. You were reminding her of how proud everybody was of her, and the support that she's geared up for everybody. Like the crowd, how much of a country got behind her and all the athletes was incredible for this Olympics.
And look, it was brilliant. It's a privilege to be that person. It really is, to be the first person that they see and they talk to when they come off the track in some of the biggest moments of their career. And in fairness, they were all fantastic. They all spoke. I think, you know, it's probably in a sporting context, we don't see that raw emotion as much anymore in terms of maybe some of the bigger sports, the more mainstream sports. It's very, you know, they say very little. And I think what our Olympic athletes did, they brought it home to people. They showed how much it means to them and the work and everything that went into it. Tears, laughter, whatever it was, I think resonated with people back home, and particularly the likes of, you know, the relay team, Sarah Lavin, Rashida. And in particular, probably, you know, Rashida, because she was so crushed. I just tried to make her feel a little bit more comfortable and bring that human connection to it. Forget about the camera. Like, let's put this in context. And, you know, I'm just glad towards the end she began to talk. You know, and you could see the smile coming back and going, you know what? Yeah,
I am proud of myself. And like you did it with Charlene as well. She got very emotional at the end of the relay, and you kind of helped her through that, as the girls did as well. Like, there was a real kind of team.
You could see that, you know? and look, it was fantastic. Paris was very special. And even with like people would say to me, geez, Gillick, you're like your overnight success. That was my third Olympics on the media side. So, you know, you learn and you grow.
But I think just the way media has been brought out, like with all the social platforms now, people are getting eyes on you more often. They're able to see behind the scenes. They're able to see things and that goes on that you wouldn't necessarily get access to. And I think this was the first games for me that you were able to really kind of see other aspects of the games that we'd never have done, like even your blog or your vlog, you know, like things like that.
Well, you want to bring people on a bit of a journey,
and that's
as
it.
well. You know, I know, like, one of the things growing up, like, you know, you might watch RT and they may not have the access to, say, some of the athletes, and the fact that, like, even though they cover a race, you may not hear from the winner, you know, because they're not Irish, and you know, because we had that location, the mix zone, I just tried to get everyone that was walking past. Didn't matter, you know. I think I probably spoke to most winners, and it was great fun and it was good crack. And they're under no obligation to talk to you. They can walk past you. Like, I'm in position 40. That essentially means there's 39 people ahead of me looking for interviews. But the athletes are brilliant, and like the likes of Noah Lyles and, you know, Femke Ball and all these kind of superstars, to get them to talk to an Irish audience was brilliant. And I've got kids at home who like athletics. My young lad Oscar loves Femke Ball. I was like, damn sure I was going to get Femke Ball, you know, and we did. And I think that kind of helped bring a little bit more to it, that people could actually go on a journey with these athletes. And, you know, you want to create an audience. You know, athletics is a sport I love, and I'd love everyone to watch it and get behind it, you know. And hopefully over the next couple of years, I think we're in a really good place with the talent coming through, even from junior level. And obviously the current talent that we have is trying to just bring that to everybody, you know, make more household names.
There's so many things I wanted to ask you, but obviously we got to be careful on time, and I think we've run over now. But thanks to the guys.
You've got a good editor.
Shane in the Collaborative Studios is brilliant. He's given us his space here, which is fantastic. But I just one or two more. Like, the one question I ask everybody is: fast forward last day of your life, right? And you have to put your message to the world up on a billboard. What does that say?
3 billboards or just one?
Just the one. And you've got 3 seconds to read it.
3 seconds. It's a great question. Like, do you know what it is? Some of the things that, trust your gut, you know, trust your gut and back yourself. And I know, try not to stress over the small things. You know, I think I spent so long stressing over little things and trying to kind of keep everybody happy. You know, who are the people that are most important in your life that you want to keep happy? You can't keep everyone happy. And it comes back to those people. So it's probably 3 kind of things there. I think it's trust your gut and back yourself. I think don't stress the small things, and put all your energy into the people that matter most in your world.
Love it. So Davey, if like you spoke about people coming up to you and talking to you about how much you helped them and how much they could relate to your story, especially in the transition from sport. But you said you went and spoke to people, or you like, some people don't know where to go and how to find support. Like, what would you advise to be the first step?
I think the first step is, like, there's lots of great charities out there. There's lots of good resources around mental health. Check them out. There's some great video content, you know, even like programs that you can follow and even become a little bit more aware of how you're thinking and talking to yourself. I also think that if somebody asks you, how are you? Be honest, you know, make some ground rules. I just want you to listen. Just listen. Another aspect could be writing things down. I think sometimes it's quite hard to maybe articulate how you're feeling. Journal them down, writing the words down. It doesn't have to be in any kind of order. Can really help. And I also think a bit of time, you know, going for a walk, getting out in the open air, whether it's by yourself or with somebody, I think can be really beneficial. And probably one of the biggest things I found was is that sort of like being male. I found it very awkward to sit down, you know, and eyeball someone and talk to them. Through an activity was far better, you know, be it a walk in the park, shoulder to shoulder, be it at a football match or whatever it might be, or any form of activity. I think is, from a male perspective, might be an easier way of kind of actually sharing things. And I also think for anyone that might be listening who might know of somebody struggling, it goes back to what you said, is listening. You don't have to have the answers, no matter how close you are to them or how you know them. You know, you don't have to have the answers. That can come down the road. You need to build that level of trust, and they need to know that they can confide in you and it's not going to go anywhere. And I also think if you know somebody isn't themselves of late, don't be afraid to approach it and actually say, I notice you haven't been yourself. Is everything okay? They might say, yeah, it's grand. But in a couple of weeks' time, if you say it again, they might then realise that you actually care. And I think that would be probably my approach to it.
Yeah, brilliant. David Gillick, thank you so much for being so honest, for sharing your career, the highs and the lows, the moments and the nuances that kind of affected you throughout your career, but also then the aftermath of it, the honesty. I think the way you're telling your story and how you're sharing your experiences and your vulnerability is giving everybody like myself and a load of other people, men, women, boys and girls, the opportunity to know that it's okay to share, and vulnerability is actually a strength. Yeah, it's like asking for help. Absolutely. It's probably the best question you could ever ask somebody. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on, pal. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me on.
Great.
All right.